options available to you if you were going to fight. You didn't have any guns to fight with. You didn't have no bullets. You didn't have nobody to go to, and they knew that if you bucked the system or if you tried to go against what was being done, you probably would be killed, and that would be it.
And there was no judicial system that was backing you up.
That's correct. The judicial system was against you. And so they knew that because they had already experienced it, I'm sure. And they were teaching us what they had already experienced, that we wouldn't have to experience that.
So as a young adult growing up in this, what was in your mind? You talked a little bit about it, but can you just expound on that? Here you have inferior schools, having to go upstairs in the theaters, back of the bus. What's going through your mind?
Wondering about why is this so? I and then wondering, how can you conclude that this person is better than me when you don't even know me? I mean, you don't even know who I am, and you've already concluded that this white person can go in the door before me or go in the front door and I got to go in the back, and you don't even know me. I don't know if you know that person, but you don't know me. So how can you conclude just by the color of my skin that you now have decided that I'm less than this other person? That just bothered me, and I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what was wrong, and I didn't know how to fix it, but I knew something was wrong. I mean, I knew that was not right.
So when do you think your first early experience were with activism and civil rights?
I think about the middle of my career in the military, because I went to the military early after high school, and when I went to the military.
What year was that when you entered the military?
1960, and there was still a little tinges of segregation when I went to the military, but the military sort of causes you to be a little bit structured, to follow the rules. If you're going to get promoted, you got to sort of follow the rules. And then after I got a certain rank in the military, and saw some things that I knew were wrong, and then in a very subtle way I started trying to fight the system. And then when I came to Northern Virginia and I joined the NAACP, then I started being much more active in trying to get some things changed.
So let's go back to being in the military. Here it is 1960. So the military is desegregated, but the surrounding areas in the South are not desegregated.
And the military at that time, in my mind, to some degree, was changed by order, but not by deed.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about that.
There were some things I used to wonder why in my unit, we would come in and we have meetings, and everyone, in many cases, not in many cases, some cases, I was like one or two blacks and say a community unit of about 10. And when they would come in, we have meetings, and the meeting always sort of ended with them getting the best of whatever the things we were discussing. And I couldn't figure that out until later I discovered they had meetings at their houses before we had the meeting there. Either had it on the golf course or some meeting that they were having or whatever. So the meeting that we had, public meeting where I was part of, was only superficial because they'd already had the meetings. Things had already been discussed and already resolved, but they went through this for me and the other person, in some case, whoever, the other black people who were there, because they'd already had the meeting.
So what rank were you when this was happening?
E9. Not E9, because that's what I retired at E9. I was at like E5, E6.
Okay, okay. What places were you stationed at?
I was stationed in Omaha, Nebraska. I was stationed in Turner Air Force Base in Georgia. I was stationed in Turkey. I was stationed here in Fort Belvoir. I was stationed in England. I was stationed in Vietnam.
So in Georgia, what was it like? Did you go outside of the base of the fort when you were stationed there, and what was it like? Because I assume that was still segregated.
Yes, and that was one of the that was early in my career, and that was one of the most discouraging moments in my almost my whole life, because I had joined the military, and I thought by joining the military that gave me some sense of personhood by being in the military. I wore a military uniform of the United States of America, and I was stationed in Texas. And after I finished my basic training, I was assigned to Savannah, Georgia, and I went home first, and took a bus from Atlanta, Georgia to Savannah, Georgia, and on my way down, I discovered that I had to use the restroom, but the buses would stop at all these little small places in Georgia, and I knew that if I got off that bus, I may have not got back on the bus. So I had to sit there with my military uniform on and not get off the bus to use the bathroom. And when I did get off the bus to get food, I'd have to go in the back of the restaurant to get the food. And I thought that was, I couldn't reconcile that in my mind, that I could go to Vietnam somewhere and fight for another country, and I can't even eat in the front door of a restaurant in the United States. That was very disheartening for me, very difficult for me to understand. And I think not bitter, but it made me more determined that I was going to do something to fix this.
So what was it like in England when you went? How did the English treat you? Did you have to go to the back of the restaurant, or?
No, in England it was not a problem, because England, I don't know if you meet, at the time England had a lot of black people from Africa and other places. England, if you had the money to go, you go in everywhere you wanted to go. I'm sure there was some vestige of people have different feelings, but I did not witness any of that while I was in England.
Right.
And ironically, the whites, while we were in England and in Vietnam, they acted different than they did once they came back to the United States.
So in what difference did they act?
Well, I mean, they didn't seem to have any problems with the association with blacks when I was in Vietnam, when I was in England. Matter of fact, in Vietnam, had one fella, he was about to kill himself, and we befriended each other, and his wife had sent him some notes and things, and we call it Dear John letters, and we were working with him, and to my mind, I think I saved him from killing him, could have been suicide. And he said, man, you helped me, and we're going to be friends forever, and when we get back to the States, I want us to make sure we stay close together, whatever. We landed back in San Francisco, and to this day, I haven't saw or heard from him since then. Hmm. So
when you were younger, at the age to be able to vote, and even during your military time, were you able to vote?
Yes, I voted in the military, but when I was in Atlanta, well, because I left Atlanta in '86, I didn't vote prior to. Yes, I did. Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Did you have any issues with registering, or?
No.
How about your parents and growing up in?
They didn't vote.
They didn't vote.
At least I don't know them to be voting.
Okay. Why do you think they didn't vote?
Well, because they had high issues. They were trying to live from day to day and feed the children. My mom, like I said, my father died when I was about 5, and my mom had, at the time, I had one brother who had left, and I had 2 sisters and 3 sisters and myself, and she was just trying to keep a roof over our head and feed us. Voting was not an issue for her.
How about in your community?
We had people who were activists in our community.
So what kind of things do you know that they were activists for?
Well, they would go around and get people to vote. They would have candidates come and talk at churches and in centers there. They would try their very best to go around the community and tell people why they should vote, and they tried their very best to tell which of these 2 candidates would be best for our community. Mm-hmm.
So you also, while you were in the military or after you came out of the military, you went to college?
I went to college while I was in the military.
Okay, so let's talk about your college years. What did you study and what was it like?
Well, my undergraduate degree was business economics. I wanted to own my own business. That was my desire, and I thought by owning my own business, I could get some power, and getting power, you can change things. And then my second degree was at Howard. I got a master's degree from Howard University. And at that time, then I had been called into ministry. I've always been in the church just about all my life. I was a deacon and a trustee, and just about every office in the church I've sort of held that. But I think I was doing all that because I didn't want to preach. I just did not want to preach. I just thought I didn't want to be no preacher. And but I knew that the Lord was calling me to preach. And when I went to Howard, prior to my going to Howard, that had been affirmed for me. Then I went to Howard, got my master's degree, and then so I was in an all-black environment, so that wasn't an issue. And then I went to my doctorate degree was from Virginia Union, and I didn't know why the Lord was sending me to get my doctorate degree, because all of the preachers that I knew in the Northern Virginia area, pretty much most of them, did not have no degree, and a master's degree was all that I thought I would need. But I was just urged by, I believe, the Lord, that I needed to get a doctorate degree. And I didn't know that until the Lord called me to First Baptist, and I was pastoring people. Many of them had 2 degrees and a very professional congregation that I was blessed to pastor. So in retrospect now, I know that Lord